Okay, so we've seen chords like these before. However, we don't know any scales yet that we can play over a chord like this. So let's dig in, let's dive in, and let's see what you can play over these types of chords. Since these scales can be hard to remember, I've really tried to make categories for them, and I've kind of failed, but we'll see that later. For now, let's look at the church mode and church mode-like scales. The first one, you know already. We're talking about scales for dominant chords here. And we already learned a scale for that. And we already know a scale like that. Dominant means we have a 1, a major third, and a minor 7th. Last video, we learned a scale that has those notes in it. It's Mixolydian. Now, we know another major scale with one adaptation, with one alteration. And that's a major scale with an augmented fourth. If we combine those two alterations, we get Lido-Mixolydian, Lido-Mixolydian. Lydian, Mixolydian, basically. So that's major with an augmented 4, which is an augmented 11, is the same thing, and a minor 7th. And there's one more. And this is basically the 5th mode of harmonic minor. Now remember, in harmonic minor, take A minor, and we turn it into harmonic minor, raising that note. We did that in order to restore our dominant tonic relationship, right? So our 5 is now a dominant chord again. What scale gets played over this? So this is just a harmonic minor. It's nothing new, it's nothing different, just a harmonic minor. What do we have? 1, a minor 2nd, a major 3rd, a 4th, a 5th, a minor 6th, a minor 7th, and a 1. It really looks like Phrygian, except it's Phrygian with a major 3rd. It's Phrygian dominant. That's what we call it. Phrygian dominant, which is basically Phrygian, except with a major 3rd. Okay. Now, I mentioned before that I tried to make categories of these. The next category is it's a doozy. It's the symmetrical scales. Now, what do we mean by symmetry? It can mean different things, but in this case, we have one pattern of intervals that we follow all the way up to the octave. And one of them is the whole tone scale, the anhemitonic hexatonic scale, but that's very nerdy, so just the whole tone scale. Whole tone. Now, there's no easy way to remember what's in there, except you know there's a 1, a major 3rd, and a minor 7th. So just fill the gaps using whole tones. One whole tone fits in here, giving us a major 2nd. 2 whole tones fit in between here, so that's a whole tone here and a whole tone there. And then we get the 3rd whole tone up to the 7th, which means we get a minor 6th, and we get the tritone, and I'm gonna write that down as an augmented 4th or a diminished 5th. This scale only has 6 notes, but there's 7 numbers. Now, we could say this is a 1, a 2, a 3, an augmented 4th, an augmented 5th, and an augmented 6th. In theory, you could say that. However, this note will definitely sound like a minor 7th. That's just the sound color it has. It's the type of tension that it has. It has the sound of a minor 7th in a dominant chord wanting to resolve down. So there's a little bit of debate about what to call this. I think it's mostly in America where people tend to call it a diminished 5th and an augmented 5th, and we're more accustomed to calling it an augmented 4th or augmented 11th and a minor 6th or minor 13. but that's just what you're used to. There's no, as long as we know which notes we're talking about the same thing. And this is a scale using only whole tones in between all the intervals. Okay. The second symmetrical scale, and the last one, is the octatonic. Now there are two iterations of the octatonic scale. One uses halftone, whole tone, other whole tone, halftone, semitone. The one that starts on a whole tone is used for diminished chords. The one that starts with a semitone, with a halftone, that's for dominant chords. Now, let's take a look at why. First, the one we're actually using. Octatonic, half, whole. Has a 1, a minor second. It's an octatonic scale. It has 8 different tones, but we only use 7 numbers. So we're going to have to use a number twice somewhere. And I opt to use it here with an augmented second. Because as soon as we have a major third in a chord, and we also have a minor third in that chord, it's just going to sound like a major third chord with an augmented second. The major third is just stronger, I guess more dominant, and a different meaning of the word dominant, than the minor second. So this is what it's going to end up sounding like. And then we finish the scale with whole tone, halftone, whole tone, halftone, and then whole tone up to the 1. Now, the most important thing to see here, it's practically Lydian dominant, except for this kind of messed up moment. But the rest of the scale is rather digestible, let's put it that way. Okay? We have a major third, we have a minor 7th, it fits in with a dominant chord. Now, if you were to use the other octatonic scale, the, well, not an H but a W, whole half, then you get 1, 2, flat third, 4. So immediately there's no major third. There's no way we can play a dominant chord here because there's, well, no major third. 4, diminished 5th, flat 6, not 7, 6, diminished 7 and 7. Okay, so that's going to look weird at first, but let me get into why we call it that. This is a diminished chord, which has a diminished 7th and a diminished 5th and a minor 3rd, right? What this basically is a diminished chord and a semitone underneath each chord tone. We've added another tone. So half under a semitone under the minor 3rd, that's the 2nd, a semitone under the minor diminished 5th, that's the 4th, a semitone under the diminished 7th, that's the minor 6th, and then semitone under the octave, actually under the 1, we've got the major 7th. This is one exception to the list of extensions I mentioned earlier. The major 7th is considered an extension or an added note on a diminished chord, diminished. Now, we will get to diminished chords later on because they're really interesting and we will get to them. One thing to know for now is that a diminished chord can replace or substitute for a secondary dominant. And if you have a secondary dominant that you play the half whole on, then that secondary dominant would get replaced by a diminished chord. If that happens, I mean, and you were still playing this scale, then in effect, you're playing this one. They're basically the same scale, but we'll have to get to that when we start talking about diminished chords. For now, I'd like to give you 2 more scales to use on dominant chords. Now, this category is called other, because I'm at a loss, I don't know how to categorize these things anymore. Remember that we had a scale called Locrian that used the major scale and lowered each tone except the 4th. Now, if you were to lower the 4th as well, you would get a scale that's sometimes referred to as super Locrian. I know, we are creative, aren't we? It's super Locrian. However, I don't like this conceptualization of this scale. Why? Well, for two reasons. One, the diminished fourth is not a diminished fourth. I mean, theoretically, yes, but it's not. That's not what it ends up sounding like. We're talking about music practice here. So if I play that note in the scale and I just land on a diminished fourth, what kind of tension am I feeling? I'm feeling the tension of a major third. That's what it feels like. Now, as soon as I have a major third, the minor third will now sound like a minor third. It will sound like an augmented second. So I'm going to replace those with major third, augmented second. And now since I at least, or we, use augmented 11th and minor 13th as extensions, I prefer replacing this diminished fifth with an augmented fourth, because that just matches our extensions a bit better. Okay. Another way to conceptualize this scale is when we take the extensions 9, 11, 13, we also have a category called the alterations. The same extensions except that they've been altered. Not a 9, but a minor ninth or augmented ninth. Not an 11th, but an augmented 11th. Not a 13, but a minor 13. They have an accidental in front of them. They've been augmented. This scale has the notes we agreed upon that we had to use in order to be playing over a dominant chord, and then it has all the augmentations. It has all of them. So we call this scale the augmented scale. That's, in my estimation, a better conceptualization of this scale. So we have one more scale to go. Now, if we look back at melodic minor, then maybe you can remember we used a minor third, but we used a major sixth and major seventh. So the first part of the scale was minor, but the latter part of the scale was major. We're going to flip that around now. Now we're going to play major at first, and the latter part of the scale is going to be minor. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, minor sixth, minor seventh. This is called melodic major. And we will come back to the scale in a later video, because it's used to do extrapolate harmony form as well. But these are basically all these scales you need to know in order to play over any chord you want to play over, at least commonly speaking. These are the dominant scales. Good luck and have fun.